some stats. I'll be boring after Forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and my podcast partner, Richard Spray. Today, we're heading into the boardroom, pulling out the spreadsheets and calculators and diving back into the numbers behind Nottingham Forest. Joining Richard and I is podcast regular and football finance specialist, Raf, the Random Pundit, and he's here to break down Forest's latest accounts, PSR position, transfer spending, wage bill, and what it all means for the club's ambitions going forwards. Plus, we'll tackle the big question that many Forest fans are asking: do we need to sell Elliot Anderson? If you've ever wondered how Forest compete financially in the Premier League, then this is the episode for you.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Cha-ching. That's kind of cash register sound that we might be hearing a little bit about over the coming months and weeks and so on. But yeah, we're back because this has been quite a hit in the past, and there's a lot of geeks out there, and I love that, and I think we all love that. But everyone's always asking, when it comes to the end of the season, is he going to be sold? Who are we going to sign? Are we going to get fined? Is there a points deduction coming up? And all that kind of stuff. So I can't answer that question. Richard's probably a little bit better answering than I am. But the person we need to answer all those questions and guide us through this next episode is our good friend, Raf, the Random Pundit. So I think in order to get us underway, just to kind of get our juices kind of like measured up, I think we're going to introduce Raf with this.
Math is a wonderful thing. Math is a really cool thing. So get off your act, let's do some math. Math.
Over to you, my friend.
Oh, thanks, guys. No. And yeah, it's really good to have fellow geeks on and kind of watching along. And yeah, do ask questions if you want as we go along, and I'll try and demystify. But as some of you know, kind of I sit in the world of, with my company, the world of football finance, and that's kind of what I do. And there's some other new developments that even as of today, where I may be getting even more entrenched into football, but that's for another time when I actually get that confirmed. But it does mean that there are some things and some insights that I do get from inside the industry. And it is all about trying to demystify these finances. We see, and everyone can click on a set of the accounts that come out. And we just, I think, 1.5 months ago, had the 24, 25 accounts that landed fresh off the presses. And you'd open them up and you kind of try and get an idea of where the club is. To be honest, there is very little that you can really glean from those accounts. And that's purposefully like that because the clubs want to be secretive. And within that, there are elements that are just missing. And that's what I try and do and reverse engineer to find out what's the missing information that they don't want us to see. Now, to give you an idea of the quantum of this missing information, you will have a set of accounts. And by the way, when I say missing information, I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. There's nothing that is like they're not misaccounting or anything. This is just what they choose to break down for us to understand. So if you have a headline figure of we've got all these costs and it's at the top end, and you go into the notes of the accounts and it gives you a nice little breakdown of how that's all made up, they don't have to show you all their workings at all. They can omit some of their workings. And when we take a look at it, we're now joining the big boys. Liverpool have about 80 million quid of unexplained cost in every single year of their accounts. We are now at the levels of having about 30 million quid of unexplained cost that is in there, that is just administrative expenses and not actually explained in any way. So this is what I do, is then try and drill down and make conclusions about what things are. And most of the time it's associated with the players, but they just don't want to let you know how much they're paying the players and agents. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on to start with And now, right, okay, we've got a PSR deadline, the final PSR deadline, and then we are done with it. It is out of here, right? But we have to pass this last PSR deadline, and it's in 3.5 weeks' time, right? So it's the end of June that we are trying to hit. So we actually know most of the information. Well, we don't, not in official accounts, but I do through my system and then working some other things out. But we're going to have to make a few deductions. And that's what we're going to do on the first slide of trying logically together work this through and figure out where we are in terms of PSR. So if we bring up the first slide, this is what we need to know. So we know from published accounts that just came out in 24-25 what our actual profit position was, right? So we're only trying to really work out this year, and we know what happened last year, we know what happened the year before, because those are all published. Now, when you go into a set of accounts very quickly and you see the bottom line and it goes, we made a loss or a profit of this year, that profit is not equal to the number that they use for PSR. And that's because you're allowed to claw back some of your costs and they don't have to count towards your loss figure or your profit figure. But let's see the reality. It's the loss figure across most of football. So to that end, they can claw back all their academy costs. They can claw back all of their buildings and equipment and the depreciation and all that type of stuff. They can claw all that back. And through Jim, one of my friends on X as well, we've kind of figured out that probably when we were down I've done EPL twice, when it was in the EFL, in the EFL, that should say, that was about 11 million quid we could claw back. And we're now at about 17 million quid each year that we can kind of claw back in PSR now that we're back in the Premier League. So how do we figure this out? So when we're figuring this out, we can go, right, what do we know what the loss was last year? We know that we made a 62 million pound loss. Well, actually, once you adjust for, as I said, the 17 million quid. Okay. Now, though, we did some sales last year, and that's just a one-off benefit. So we have to add them back in. We got some loan fees in as well, but that's a one-off. So we have to kind of add that back in to know what's our steady state loss. So we figured that out of our base loss, really, that we've got. So the base loss that we're working off is 73 million quid that this club loses every single year from a PSR standpoint, right? The actual loss is bigger than that because you add another 17 million quid on. So we're talking chunky losses every single year. But because of PSR, you can lose 105 million pounds over a 3-year period. So if we work out what we know, we're effectively our maximum loss we can make in this year is 72 million quid. That is also because we did not hit the maximum allowed in 24-25. We actually came in 20 million quid under the PSR buffer. So actually, that was pretty good. It was pretty good. And that gives us a bit of breathing room this year as well, because we weren't buffering up against it last year. But what does that mean? We actually need to be about £1.5 million better off through our finances in this year than we were last year. So we can go through the variable things that we have this year in terms of finance and figure out, are we going to be good for that 1.5 mil, or is there some work that we need to do in the transfer window? So in the summer of last summer, there are a whole lot of players that left. Now, with them, when they left, went their wages, but also the amortization charges that we'd be getting for this year. So we can add back all of that value that we're not having to pay this year that we had to pay last year. That was a whopping 86 million pounds worth of value that we get back into the club that we're not having to spend on those players that left for this year. We know that we had a sponsorship uplift, and we think it's probably around 3 million quid more that we get. Add that into the pot. But this is where we get to the complete roller coaster that was this year in terms of club performance. So we finished 16th, not 7th. That's going to cost us about 27 million quid in Premier League merit payments, effectively. That's kind of prize money, as it were. About 27 million quid down. But we got to the semi-finals of Europa. And was worth in prize money about 20.5. So net from that, we are actually down from performance in terms of prize money about 6.5 million quid from tanking the league but getting to the semi-final in Europa. Weird, I know, but that's kind of why the Champions League is the holy grail in terms of revenue generation. Now, it's not just prize money we got out of Europe. We actually got extra revenue. We sold extra tickets. There's all of the extra match day revenue that comes from our home games. We've definitely merched up. I mean, I certainly merched up the amount of shirts that I've got with Europa badges on and everything else as well. So there's probably definitely extra merch that's been sold. So there are some extra revenues that are in there, but it does cost to fly the team around for all these away matches around Europe, okay, and all the costs that are associated with those away games. Which is why they said, if we were in the conference, you actually don't make any money because the costs associated with traveling around for the conference and the prize money that you're getting out actually equates to each other until you get to about the semi-finals anyway. And then you only start making a profit. But I do think we'll make a bit more money than the costs were there. It's just we don't know. And there's no real way to quantify it because we haven't really been in this situation before. So there's a little bit of maybe that squares it all out. If we think about how much we lost for the league, how much we got in prize money, but all the extra revenues may square itself off. So if that squares itself off, we are kind of at this stage, the best part of 90 million quid up. But over the summer and in January, we got new players in, right? And they've got wages and amortization. And also we paid loan fees for players like Luca, which was a total waste of money. But of course, we have to pay for those loan fees. And that's different from last year, right? Because we've already baked in the loan fees for last year. So that cost us, I've worked out through my system, that's cost us the best part of £83.5 million. So at that juncture, we are probably we're still doing okay, right? We're still doing okay. And we've got loan fees that have come in. Jota went out on loan. Cali went out on loan. Curbano on part of his loan. We all got fees for them that came in. But then we get to the bit of the trouble for this year, which is quite unique. And it's having 4 managers and having to pay them off, which is not ideal. There is a piece that's been done of analysis. If we looked at some published accounts at the half year, it was all around about the Ange timing of things. And we saw that really kind of a true cost of Ange, the bottom line, was the best part of about 3 million quid, 2.9 million quid that cost us. Nuno went straight into another job. So I don't think that will cost us that much as a payoff. Dyche is still not in a job. I don't know how much that is going to cost us. And we're really kind of guessing. But we do know from accounting, if they have severances, they pay all of it up front. They don't drip feed the payments. They pay it all up front. Now, of the unknowns, I think we're probably about equal, within the margin of error, about equal, before we add in the extra Europa monies. But we have the cost of the managers. So I think that maybe of these blank spaces, which is the extra Europa revenues, the Europa costs and the manager costs, I reckon they probably net each other out. Maybe, hopefully they net each other out at a guess, maybe, which means the fact that we make a slight worse position than last year. But remember, we needed to be 1.4 million pounds better off. So my estimate is that we're in the ballpark of, say, around about 1.72 million quid that we need to make on player sales to get our loss up to where it's acceptable for this summer. Now, this is where we start getting tactical. Okay, so this is the last PSR window. We do not need to smash this PSR window. We need to creep over the line for the last judging and just get over it. And then we've got onto a new set of rules that we're going to come on to at the end. So I don't expect us to be absolutely fire selling players before we get to the 1st of July, because there is really no need. We might need to sell 1 or 2 just to creep over the line and over it, just to make sure there aren't any accounting errors in the background. But yes, this is the case. So we're selling players. Now, what I've put up in the top right for those that are watching, and I'll quickly scan down, is to give you an idea of some players that we might sell, but what's the book value of it? So remember, when you sell a player, it's not what did you buy them for and how much money are you selling them for as a profit. It's what have you not amortized, i.e. the book value that's still left on them, and then you get then how much you sell them for to get the profit. So John Victor, 4.9 million quid. So again, with these numbers, we need to sell them for more than this number, and that's when the profit starts kicking in. So you can get the idea of the quantum of what we need to sell them for. David Carmo, right? 5.75 million quid. Morato, 5.75 million quid. Tyler Binden, 0.4 million quid. Savona, 9.25 million quid. Moriera's 0.6 million quid. Curbano, 4.1 million quid. Callum Hudson-Odoi, who knows, right? 1.25 million pounds. Is Dan Doy? There's lots of reports that Dan Doy is going to get moved on and lots of interest from Italy. But we're going to have to clear 29.4 million pounds as at the 30th of June of the amortization. As at the 30th of June, clear nearly 30 million quid to make a profit on him. Backward, 26.1 million pounds. Jota Silva, he's coming back from loan. He's probably going to get moved on, I would probably expect. We've got to clear 3.1 million pounds to make a profit on him. Callum Wendo, maybe they're going to activate his clause. It's not what we bought him for, remember. So as long as we sell him for 21.3 million quid, we are all level when it comes to a profit or a loss on that player. And Taiwo, Big T, right? We bought him for 17.7 million pounds back in the day, but he's had contract after contract and he's been here for ages, right? His book value, when you pour all of those really complicated calculations, right, for new contracts and everything, he's now sitting at about 3.5 million quid if we move him on. And it might be Taiwo. I think it might be. It's probably going to be Jota Silva, a Taiwo, a John Victor, and probably a David Carmo, I think, are probably the prime people. But again, don't sell all 4. We probably only need to make about 2 million quid. Then, come the 1st of July, get rid, right? Get rid of all the deadwood that we've still got left in the squad. And as we've heard, we're probably going to sign 4 or 5. The Mail is saying 6 players. I don't really agree with that. That's just hot off the presses right now. But you'll see the ins and the outs probably happen then, right? So that's the key thing. And by the way, do not worry about the Murillo new contract that was just signed right now. Nico's contract, if it gets signed in the next couple of weeks, there's no real impact on the finances for PSR because it's right in the last couple of days of the window. So it's not really having any impact whatsoever on this window. So don't panic about those things. Right, guys, that's just about PSR and where we are now. The two of you, over to the two of you. Have you got any questions? Are there any questions from the viewers?
Yeah, brilliant first slide. Really good chance for us to kind of quickly dip in with some questions. Just clarify as well. So you're saying, because a lot of the chat around has been that actually because of the Alanga sale last summer and other things that have went on, and you've broken it down really nicely, because of all of that, going into this PSR deadline, the chat has been, Forest are fine. There's nothing to worry about. But by your kind of calculations, and some of it is a little bit of unknown, you're suggesting, just to clarify, that we need to make about 1.72 million with a cheeky little sale just to balance it out on this last window.
Yeah, and again, like I said, the hidden numbers everywhere in the club. So we might be on the line. What we're trying to get out of this is, I reckon we are slightly over the line. We could be fractionally under the line, but we are in the margin of error that we are not totally fine and we are not totally screwed either. Like, this isn't a sell one of the golden assets that we have to be able to make PSR window. We're in the margin of error here where you'll see the level of trading only needs to be incidental, if anything.
So I guess...
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead,
just
mate.
going to quickly say. So I'll let you come in. So I guess the big burning question that we all have been asking is, we don't need to sell Elliot Anderson. Then we don't need to sell him. Is that
So
correct?
we don't need to sell him at all, right? At all. But we will then talk about the Anderson sale if and when we get to the final slide and we talk about squad cost ratio going forward, and how does any Anderson sale become relevant to squad cost ratio going forward. But for PSR, for this window, loud and clear, we do not need to sell Anderson. We should, and when we get onto it, we should not sell Anderson 100% before the 30th of June if we are being tactical about maximizing our sales to help us in the future for new rules coming in.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was just going to ask real quick because I know Morato's the one that everyone was kind of assuming might be a bit of at a peak level in terms of being able to sell him just because of the performances. But you're saying you wouldn't do that clearly before the July 1st. You would prefer that we do that after July 1st because then we don't have to use his profit and really to overcome whatever potential gaps we have with PSR. So it might be better to wait until after July 1st for those kinds of assets potentially. I mean, does it matter either way? But
potentially it doesn't matter if you get over. But the key thing is, we're armchairing here, right? We're not sitting in the club, and the ease with which to sell these players and to be able to get that, there may be an easier sell. We could just get Morato done and not have to get really close to the 30th of June and just get it done. And the profit may be 7 million quid. And it's fine. Do you know what? To make sure that we've got it done before the 30th of June, everyone can relax and everyone can focus on afterwards and the other deals. We might sell someone that's a mid-tier, but a one-off sale just to get it done. It's not like we lose all of that. And I'll explain it when we get to squad cost ratio. It's just not optimizing the situation, but that's purely with a finance CFO brain on. That's not a practical, I'm the head of recruitment, right? I'm not a Cyrianos and just thinking about what I can't actually do that. So we're going to have to do this one, as it were.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Just quickly jumping into the comments to say good morning to Steph. Good to have you back there, Steph. She says, nerd that I am, I love these episodes. As I said last year, I come for the intros and stay for the stats and numbers, and Anne is in full agreement on that.
Brilliant.
As well, as is Anna, who's with us. She's here for some nerdy chat stat too.
Hey,
Scott from Down Under. Scott from Down Under is not Down Under. Scott from Down Under is in the UK. And he's visiting. So he says, hello, Talking Reds, leading the way in Forest financial analysis. Loving your work. And Andrew Hayward says, plenty of fringe players in the squad who can make that kind of profit. So
correct, Andrew. It's just the ability to shift them to realise that. That's the key thing that we don't have exposure for because we don't work at the club.
And if it is just a very tiny bit that we need to make up, then it could just be one sale that we get done before the 30th of June that just kind of puts us into the comfort zone that we need to be in. Okay, fantastic. Cool. Are you ready for slide 2, buddy?
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is we're going to leave the squad cost ratio to the end, right? To then go, what type of shape are we for the new rules? But what we're going to do is just lift the lid on roughly what's going on at the club, like generally within finance terms, and try and understand, is there a trend? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? What does this look like? And we'll get into Marinakis, is he writing off some debt? Is he putting new debt in? Is he changing stuff up? What's going on? How big is our debt kind of thing? We'll get into that because that's usually what a lot of people want to kind of know about, right? Okay, so let's start off with the good stuff, right? This is making money and also the people aspect at the club. So the revenues, what we've got on the screen is I've done the last 3 years, and this is what we can talk with some form of authority. I'll call out where I've had to work out the numbers and what is actually lifted from accounts. Okay, revenue lifted from accounts, but we've got the last 3 years of published accounts. So that is on the left-hand side, our first year back in the Premier League, 22-23. Then we had the second year, 23-24, still surviving just. Then we had breakthrough year, 24-25, when we exceeded all expectations and finished 7th, right? So the revenue over those 3 years went from, I'm gonna average these numbers just for the people listening rather than watching, and it'll be quicker. So about 155 million when we made in the first year back up. That jumped to about 190 million in the second year, okay? And then it jumped again to about 120 million in the third year. Now, looking at it, that jump, though, that we had, I think the jump that we had in the middle was the fact that we, ticket prices went up a bit, but we were, I think we monetized, now that we're back in the Premier League, a lot of our endorsements and sponsors and other media deals started kicking in that second season because we stayed up, and they were more willing to tie into deals with us because we were going to stay up now going into the future. So we monetized better our commercial aspect in that 23-24. But did we get better at commercials? Not really last year, because that whole jump is pretty much prize money from the Premier League. So we have our core financials of our revenue generating. We have already, it looks like, squeezed the being back in the Premier League jump that we get with our sponsors, with media teams, with all of us buying just tons of crap left, right, and center. We've maximized that, and we're now at steady state, which is why we're talking about the new stadium. We're talking about all these other things that we want to do, because this is the key line that we need to make better to be able to afford the odd mistake in the transfer window and it not totally kill us, right? So, as I've already talked about for this year, on the right-hand side, you've got my thinking about maybe what the accounts will say for 25-26, which ends in 3 weeks' time. We've already talked about league position down, Europa money up, merch up. It probably levels itself out, probably. Now, core player wages. This is what I know from the system, of my system plugging it in. Our player wages, when we first came up, were the best part of 50 million quid. We then jumped when we knew that we were staying up, and we really tried to bolster our squad again in 23-24 up to about 73 million quid. This is just core wages, by the way. This isn't the bonuses they're paid. Then when we took a tilt and finished 7th, actually our core wages were less than they were in 23-24. And if you remember, this is when we stabilized. We shopped people out, but we didn't massively change the core of our team. And that stability was the reason why we finished 7th in the league and spent nearly half of the season in the top 4. It was that stability. But we cleared the decks of all of those players that we got in just to keep us up. So the wage bill actually the core wage bill went down. But looking at this last year, it's gone up from what is the best part of 67 million quid up to about 88 million pounds. And that's the new premium players that we got in over the summer and the wages that they attract that we've got in. Plus, you remember, we gave out new contracts to Morgan Gibbs-White, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and to the others as well last summer. And those are all part of why the core wages are all going up. And by quite a big jump, you're 68 million to about 88 million, right? So that's about 20 million quid more in core wages that we're paying players this year. Now, the bonuses. I cannot describe to you the complexity of trying to unpick the accounts to be able to understand what bonuses are truly paid to players, because just at high level, they lump the players, the manager, all the coaching staff, all of the office staff, all the performance staff, the physios, the temporary staff, the stewards, absolutely everyone is condensed into one line for wages and bonuses, right? And it's the skills of using tax law and various other things that I kind of know. I've been able to kind of estimate roughly what we pay in bonuses, which is a real eye-opener of what we've got. Now, when we're kind of doing these, there's some hidden elements of why the percentages don't necessarily work as you're going down. That's because there's a hidden element of image rights that are in here that are not part of core wages, that are another calculation that I do. And that is something they 100% do not advertise in the breakdown, because it's effectively a tax avoidance scheme that the HMRC is cutting down. So the numbers don't track here, but that's because there's a hidden element of these image rights that are paid to players. Now we get into that on the final slide when I demystify it. But the bonuses, just at headline level, in the first year, just to stay up, Marinakis was paying in the region of about 100% bonuses to the players in terms of their core salaries that he was paying them for that, just to stay up. Now, in the second year, if you think about it, the jeopardy was still that we could go down, but he didn't reward the players as much in the second year with bonuses. And the bonuses, because we finished about the same place, right? So metrically, in terms of performance, it was about the same. But he still paid them about 60 to 65% bonuses just for not, again, going down. And when you think about the quantum of what these bonuses are, if they're around about the £60 million mark, think about how much you lose in terms of Premier League money. It's about £152.5 million we got last year from the Premier League. And it's down into the 40s when you go down into the Championship. So you can see why he's putting and paying these big bonuses, because it's not worth going back down to the Championship. He's forking out basically kind of a little bit more than half of the benefit of staying up in the Premier League. Now, let's look at last year. We smashed the league. We got into Europa, so they definitely got bonuses for that. But the bonuses stayed about what they were in terms of year 2 back in the Premier League. And that's probably because he went, do you know what, guys? You're not getting bonuses anymore for staying in the Premier League. We're now up here, or maybe a little bit, but only tiny. Getting Europa, absolutely massive. It wasn't Champions League, so I don't think they probably got the jackpot of 100% bonuses, but it's still around that 60% of wages. It'll be very interesting to see what the expectations for bonuses are. I think bonuses will come slightly down because we didn't win Europa, but we got to the semi-final, so it's good and they'll get paid for it. But in league terms, we did not do well. Actual performance bonuses, if you think about the players, their own stats were off the charts in 24-25, but stats, probably Morgan Gibbs-White, Igor Jesus, Anderson, maybe Nico will get paid decent performance bonuses, but everyone else probably not. Huge Wood bonuses that were paid out in 24-25 will be nothing pretty much for performances in 25-26. So then we're just a little bit of a deep dive into kind of the structure of the club and what does it really mean. So if we think about the non-player volume, you've got about 170 people that grew to about 210, say, that's grown to about 250 in 24-25. And this shows the fact that we're growing as a club, but this is the professionalism, right? When we look at the volumes of staff that we've got for doing various jobs, more people in analytics roles, better medics, all of this type of stuff, which is more professionalizing the club. Director salaries have gone down from £1 million to £750,000 to £500,000, less than £500,000 in those 3 years. So there's the responsibility of the top tier not to be taking the piss, basically, as well, which is very good. But there's a responsibility to know the money can be spent within the club. And this is where the other big ticket item is amortization of those player purchases that come in, right? You can see the trend of where we're going, but that's because we want a better squad. These aren't bench players. We want 18 first team players that you can interchange and they're all good as each other. This is what we're trying to achieve. So amortization went from the best part of 41 million quid up to about 62 million quid, up to in 24-25, 69 million quid. And out of my system, I figured out that for the last year that we're about to finish, this current year, that is up to the best part of 89 million quid in amortization, because we are beefing up the quality of our squad and that cost comes along with it. So be cognitive of what we talked about, wages going up about 20 million quid. Amortization has gone up the best part of 20 million quid as well, right? 20 and 20. We'll hear those numbers in a second when we come to squad cost ratio a bit later on. Okay, so very quickly before we do next slide, guys, do you want to talk anything and questions about the revenue, the people, bonuses, that type of thing?
I'll pass to Richard. I think I just want to say it just goes to show that in any business, the more successful you become, the more money comes into it, and the more you need to spend on employees and everything else. It's a typical business. You know, you're in the Premier League, you're getting better in the Premier League, you're bringing a bit more money in, you're spending more money. You know, it's all kind of like making sense in that respect. Was just one question. Was there anything that stood out as an oddity though in any of this to you? Or did it all kind of like read pretty much as you'd expect?
Do you know what? The director salary is coming down. I did not see that coming. You would think that with responsibility, because we're becoming more and more senior, you'd get paid more. They're actually paying themselves less, which I found very surprising. And also from a governance perspective, you kind of want wages to track up a bit more because they're doing more of a job and they've got more responsibility. But maybe they were just being paid too much to start off with, and they're now normalizing it a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, it's hard to know, right? Because without seeing the books across all of Marinakis' clubs, like what was the actual impact of Edu? Because you can't imagine that would have been cheap in terms of bringing him in just because of the cachet he's bringing in. So I'm guessing it's probably going to remain a mystery after this season as well. It'd just be interesting to see how that is represented. I mean, it won't be a line item in terms of what they share, right? Graph on the books. It's just like cumulatively, what are the director salaries or whatever that. I mean, or is that more of an administrative salary, do you think?
So Edu would come into that wider admin salaries. He's not he's not a director of the club, so he would be back in those come on to full-time employees. He'd be a full-time employee wage that is in there.
Fantastic. Okay, just quickly before we move on, let me say thank you very much to Mark for his £2 in the pot. He says my head hurts with all the possibilities.
Wait till we get to squad cost ratio, my friend.
Yeah, I know. There are a couple of questions that I'll jump back to at the end. So those of you that have asked a few good questions, we'll do those at the end. Let me also say thank you to Binnett for the $4.99. Really appreciate
thanks,
it.
buddy.
Excellent stuff, he says, to Raf and the team. And Dor on tour is with us. Hey, Ben, he says he loves this. So that's great. It's going down really well, as we always knew it would do. We're about halfway through.
Right. So if we now go on to the scary slide, this is the debt situation, right? And before we get into it, we are not as bad as Man U, right? If you look at this slide for Man U, it is shocking.
That's all we really need to hear, right? I mean, in the end.
So bad. But we don't have the revenues that Man U have. So we need to be cuter with our business. So again, we've got the 3 years again up on the screen, left to right, of the 3 years that of the published accounts. Now, what's to explain of kind of, I think most of you will know, but these days, when you go and buy a player, you do not pay upfront for the whole player. And in Man U's case, they're still paying for players that they've actually even sold, and they're still paying for having bought them in the first place, even after they've sold them. But you pay in installments. And it's the same when you sell a player. You're not going to get all the money up front. You will receive the money in installments, like Brennan came in installments, for example, from Palace. So from that perspective, this is where we look at the accounts and you look at, right, we are owed money on past transfers, and we're going to get paid that in the next year. And then there's stuff that we're going to get in the future that isn't coming in the next 12 months. And you've got the same for money that we owe in the next 12 months. These are all on transfers. And then we owe in the future installments outside of 12 months. I'm not going to worry about what the timings of all this is. I just put it up there for you to watch in interest. But what I'm going to talk about is the net effect of this year on year. Okay, so for 22-23, our first year back, we had a net set of payments out, right? So we're not owed money, we owe money out of 112 million quid in future payments that need to be made. Now, we then got our first set of, I think probably a lot of players, we paid the bulk of it over the first year. And as you can see above, 46 million quid was owed in that first year. So we had to pay that back. So the number then dropped down, and it drops down to about 70 million quid. Because as you can see, You don't get all, well, it's pretty much all of your 40 million, 45 million quid that's down there. So when we bought better in the second year in the fact that when we were paying for players, we decided not to pay up front for hardly anyone. But you can see an eye-watering amount for 23-24 that we owed 111 million quid in the next year. In 24-25, we had to pay 111 million quid on transfers. And this, if you think back, this is the craziness of when we bought like 25 players in the first year and then like another 18 or however many it was in the second year, right? These are all transfer fees of everything that was going on. So we got the net of it down to about 70 million quid, pretty much bang on, for the 23-24 of the net we owed 70 million quid. That crept up a bit last season to about 73 million quid. But, with the players that came in, but that's the stability, actually. Last year we had stability. We really didn't buy too many players in. It was pretty much stable. So you could see there was a bit of stability. We got one or two players in, and again, on terms that are really favorable to us. But we're in that situation where we are net having to carry this money that we owe that will vest in 1, 2, 3 kind of years scan. So we've got that we're carrying. We are not net zero. We owe on players that we are currently using to the tune. Well, last year, it was about 73 million quid. Okay. Then we get into the really interesting fact, right? The loans that are sitting in the club. So what we have been doing, and we've just talked about how many players we have been buying. Money does not grow on trees. Yes, we have got Premier League money that is coming in. But if you think about the amount that we've been spending on transfers, of which has been widely publicized on Sky and other offerings as well, this all has to get paid for somehow. So we borrow money. So loans that we have in the first year when we came back at the year end, there were loans of about 67.5 million quid that we had on the books. Now, if you remember this figure of loans, the loans during the year were actually larger, and Marinakis would put money in as cash, right? Loans that came in as cash. We would get Premier League money back out, whatever it was. And then he would actually not repay his loans. He would then turn them into shares very near the end of the year to get this loan figure down, right? And then write off a lot of the loans. But the amount of loans that we had grew in the middle year, so second year back up, to the best part of 96 million quid that we had in loans, okay, that were owed. And that was pretty stable last season at about 98 million quid. But you see, we're very highly geared here. These are loans that we owe, and we also owe that 70 odd million quid on players as well. So there is a vast amount of money that we are geared up here of payments that we need to make in the future. Now, to give you context, we can go, well, that was kind of in the summer of 25. So what's been going on? Now, we don't have any way of knowing if Marinakis has put loans into the club over the last year. But what we can tell is if any of this converting loans into shares have been happening, or he's found other ways of putting money into the business. Very interestingly, we have for the last year, another 17 million quid of debt was converted into shares, right? That has got to be Marinakis. But if you have a look at what the debt was last summer of 98 million, if you take that off, that gets us to pretty much near 80 million quid. And there is an existing term loan agreement with a Luxembourg firm for 80 million quid. So it looks like strategically Marinakis has bundled up all of the loans that we had, which he did do if you look over the last, and he's put this one loan out now that we have with a single provider for 80 million quid. Okay. That expires in December 27. That's when we need to pay it back. But there is an option to extend it to December 29. Now, for everyone that's got a mortgage out there or got loans, you're going, well, that's all very well and good, but what's the interest we are paying on this privilege? So the interest rate we have got, and I would say for a loan, this isn't terrible at all, is 8.75%. So 8.75% annually is what we are paying on that £80 million term loan that is there. So again, we've got finance costs that are coming off of that loan as well, which are not ideal. That off the top of my head, that's the best part of about 7.5 million quid that you're paying on interest every single year to finance that loan. But interestingly, there was a new issue of shares to the tune of 63.27 million quid as well that happened over this season. Now, for me, I would bet my bottom dollar that is Marinakis, and he's now got all of his debt out of there, and he's now just, again, it's professionalization. He's not just making loans and then converting it. He's just going, do you know what? I'm just going to buy shares, and I'm going to pump in cash that way directly into the shares. We've now got one loan for 80 million quid here. If we need more cash, of which you can see from the finances, we still do, he's pumping it in through new shares. So there's about an injection of 63 million quid that's come in from him over last season, as well as clearing off 17 million pounds of debt. So Marinakis is still massively helping us out every single year with crazy quantums of money to keep this club afloat. But very quickly at the end, to then a bit of discipline, fixed assets. So again, kind of infrastructure of training facilities and buildings and tech that we've got. There is a steady investment that is slightly growing. It went from 8.5 to about 10 to about 10.5 over those 3 years, that we are investing in professionalizing the business to the tune of about 10 million quid and going slightly up every single year and getting better tech and infrastructure into the club. And discipline wise, it's actually eye-watering to look at what our bank balance was at the end of the first 2 seasons. It was £92,000 at the end of the first year that we were back up. In the bank at the end of the second year was £29,000 that was in the club's bank account. But again, more mature. By the end of last summer, we had 13 million quid in the bank. Again, not large amounts compared to what you've seen above, but at least it shows the fact that we're not trying to fly by the seat of our pants, and we're acting in a slightly more mature manner about our cash flow, right? It's not great, but at least it's maturing.
Fantastic.
Does that make sense, guys? Any questions?
That's good.
Yeah.
This is probably a good place to maybe bring in Ant's question. He was asking, how does the investment in the City ground affect the finances? So obviously the stadium has been ongoing. I myself have got a little bit fatigued by it. We are going to be doing an episode with Matt Druitt in a couple of weeks' time, so look out for that one.
Question.
Whenever that happens, where's that money coming from, and how does that affect the balance sheet?
So what we're going to get onto, and I'll explain the squad cost ratio, but for PSR, if you were to build a new stadium, your stadium costs would get capitalized because it's a building, and then you would depreciate the asset over time, over 50 years for a building. Probably it's actually in the accounts. I can look up what their policy is on buildings, but I imagine it's 50 years probably. So you do not have to take a chunk to your profit. It doesn't hit your profit for building stuff, right? And your depreciation that comes out onto the accounts every single year is an allowable that got taken out of PSR anyway. But PSR's dead come this summer. So if we start building, let's not think about PSR. Let's think about squad cost ratio. Costs for depreciation and all of that jazz still don't come into squad cost ratio. So from a profitability perspective and the metrics of things that we need to meet, and by the way, if we get back into Europe, UEFA have still their version of PSR as well that you still need to meet. It doesn't matter for that either, right? So the only consideration is cash, and the cash to pay the invoices. But I imagine that is a Marinakis, let's get some more shares into the business, and then I will just pay the bills myself. And that's how it's going to get financed. But building new shiny stadium does not actually impact what we have on the profit and loss. And to that end, I would say that is probably why we're seeing him shift into just buying shares straight away and not putting loans in, because that's what Everton got, and the Everton owner got done for was putting in 0% loans into the business and not charging interest at a market rate. So if Marinakis puts loans in and then later converts them at the end of a year, there's an interest charge that's then floating around. So we're saving money by him not putting loans in, but putting it directly in as new, fresh equity, which makes sense. And that points towards, by the way, breaking ground in the new way that we would be doing about financing the new stadium. Oh, sorry, the revamped stadium. We're not moving. So yeah, revamped stadium.
Is what Marinakis is doing when he converts money to shares. Is that like a little bit of a loophole? Because there's this long-standing thing that owners can't put money into their clubs anymore, and yet he's putting money in and then he's converting it. So is that like a loophole? How many times can he do that? And what is the outcome of all of that? I mean, he just pumps cash in, turns it into shares, and then off we go.
Yeah, well, you can fund your you can still fund your clubs, but what it just stops you from doing is being able to buy 1 squillion. It's not revenue. When he puts that money in, it doesn't hit like the revenue line. So every single year, it's not boosting your squad cost ratio denominator or your PSR revenue line. So it's not helping you by pumping the money in. It doesn't give you a boost for PSR. What it does is it helps you in terms of cash flow. And it does help you a bit for PSR of not having to pay so much interest on the loans if you don't put it in as loans. But if you're putting it in as loans, it's not helping you massively because you've got finance loans that are then coming in as well. So it's not cheating for that reason. It's not boosting your revenue line at all.
Okay, Rich?
Nothing.
Cool.
I'm good.
Okay, good stuff. Before we do move on, I think actually, again, this question might be a good opportunity to pop up from Steph. She's asking about, do you feel, Raf, that we are at the right place now for when we are heading into year 5? Obviously, I know things are going to change, as you mentioned, with SCR coming in. But looking at the financial revenues and people, the debt situation that you've taken us through, are you thinking that we're in a pretty good position at the moment going into year 5?
So if I take professionalism as a whole, no, you don't have the Nuno situation happen at a well-run, well-governed club. But you also don't get money being pumped in if you don't have an owner like ours. So I think we will always have a ceiling as to how professional we can get as a club while Marinakis is still here. But that's the balance that we really have in terms of that. You cannot have if you are super professional, you cannot have a king or queen that sits at the top that makes every single decision, and it doesn't go through a board that goes to votes for transfers and everything else as well, that you have a well-governed structure. But if you have a look at the disciplines in the finance that we're doing, yes, Steph, I do think we are getting more mature. And actually, to think of where we were when we were coming out of the championship, the infrastructure for handling our finances, I think, is getting better, which does make me feel more comfortable that we're not going to suddenly mess up massively.
And then just one more, Pat's asking about shares. He's asking that you can't keep creating them, right? Well, you kind of
yes, can. You can.
You kind of ask Mark Zuckerberg and his buddy that you can end up diluting someone out of a company by creating a gazillion shares. It can happen, unfortunately.
He is diluting himself basically at the same time. So he's just creating more shares. But yes, if you have 100 shares, you could issue 50 shares, but then the percentage that these 100 shares have of it going to go down. But if the value of the company is all going up, then the value of your shares, if it's done right, the value of all the shares all stays at the same when you issue all of the shares, because you're issuing them at share price and you're having to pay that share price. It's a bit complex in terms of equity management, but for the shareholders, they shouldn't lose out in terms of what their shares are worth. But yes, you do issue new shares, and you can do that. And that is what they did for the £63 million worth of new shares that got issued in the last 12 months.
Okay, fantastic. We've covered PSR, we've covered revenues and people, we've looked at the debt
last
situation.
Bit.
Here we
last
go.
Bit. Right, so we're going to go on to the new world and squad cost ratio, right? And this is where we get into a bit of the really putting the spotlight on the hidden bit that the club does. All football clubs do not want you to know how much they pay their players, right? Inside a football club, there are probably only 3 or 4 people that truly know the details of remuneration in the player contracts. That's it. In the finance function, the CFO might know, but the rest of finance won't know. Head of recruitment probably knows, but not the rest of recruitment, other than the person that probably dealt with the contract, right? A couple of board members might know, but the actual detail of what each player is paid, payroll person probably knows because they're having to pay them out at certain times, right? But other than that, these are really guarded secrets. So for my job with systems that go into these clubs and the data that they've got, none of that data is used in the stuff that I do here, because that is all legally locked away. Everything that we do on here is publicly available data, and then using my system to collate public data and treat it, and then use some, let's just say, reverse techniques of what you do know, and therefore you can deduce this, and therefore you can do this, and then do some simultaneous equations and deduce this and deduce this. And that's how we kind of reverse engineer understanding what the players are paid. But you have to make some assumptions as to how, what hours temporary staff work. Are the bonuses that the staff are paid, do they pay, is that included in their pensions, right? So is it, the fully enrolled, the auto enrolling, bonuses are in. But if they're not on auto enrollment and they've opted out of auto enrollment, you don't have to pay bonus. You don't have to pay your pension on your bonuses either. That affects how much the players are paid. There are lots of moving parts that we don't know what the club is doing, and it affects trying to understand how big they are. But that's why we put a range for the bonuses that are in there, because we've done if it's the worst case scenario and this all runs up, if it's the best case scenario and this all goes up, that's kind of where we get to. So for squad cost ratio, there's a large focus on what the players are paid, which is why we get into this. Okay. So where we get into this is, again, how do we calculate squad cost ratio? So you've got, which you'll hear maybe the terminology, numerators and denominators, okay? And that is simply just doing an equation or a ratio. The numerator is all the costs on the top, and then you've got the revenue on the bottom. Now, if you think about that and you create a percentage, bad is a higher percentage because your costs are going up or your revenue is going down. Therefore, the numerator gets larger. Therefore, the percentage gets larger, which is why if we think about the thresholds we've got for squad cost ratio, 85% is the target. Above 85% is bad, right? But as a quick refresher, and you might say, oh, this is, so bad and it's always like big six orientated. I actually think these squad cost ratios are more in the favor of clubs like us and Newcastle and Villa, although Villa have kind of pipped ahead a bit, but Bournemouth and other clubs like that, they're trying to break into that, because PSR, if you didn't hit it, you got points deductions. Whereas with squad cost ratio, it's 85, but it's a soft threshold. You can go up to 105 and probably you will get a fine, but you're not going to get deducted points. But if you go over 105, then you get deducted points. So again, it allows teams like us to flex a bit more on certain years where we're trying to get something done, and we can take a fine and not points, right, for that. The issue is your fines probably will actually go. I think they're going to put them into your cost base for the next year, but such is life, right? But you're still trying to, it gives you a bit of flex. But also, I'm going to explain something of this, and I'll come back to it, guys. And if I forget, remind me of when we talk about how you work out player sales and profits, why I think this benefits the smaller clubs. Okay, so if we go and player wages and bonuses, I've talked about the reverse engineering, but when we do all this reverse engineering, and Rich has seen some of my Excel sheets, right, where we work this all out and some of the assumptions that go in here, I think that roughly player wages and bonuses in the first year that we're back up were about 115 million quid. I think they went up to about 133 million quid in the second year up. And the glory year, when we came seventh, they went down. Remember, I was saying they went down. They actually went down. Stability not actually buying 1 million players, right? And just having a core group of players that we work with. Get rid of all of the deadwood. If you remember, the Harry Arters and all of those types of people, all the deadwood of all of these other players that we kind of cleared the decks last summer, or the summer before to get to last season. So we went down to about 125 million quid. So 133 down to 125. So better kind of going down that way. Image rights. I'll quickly talk about these. These are actually player wages and bonuses, but players set up companies, right, to pay some of their wages, and they frame them as image rights, right? So you can have them in, the clubs can use them in adverts, and other sponsors want to use them in adverts and other bits and pieces. So the club pays them part of their wages in image rights for the right to be able to use them in adverts associated with the club and the sponsors and everything else as well. Now, in the old days, you used to be able to funnel lots of information, lots of these costs into image rights. And remember, I was talking about the missing numbers that are not explained in administrative costs in the accounts. Image rights make up the vast majority of this missing money that is out there that they do not want to explain. And the reason why they don't want to explain it is, one, it shows you how much they're paying the players. But if you pay a company, the players are not paying income tax on their wages. They're paying corporation tax, which is like half the rate, which is wonderful. And as the club, if they're paying a company and not the player themselves, they don't have to pay employer national insurance contributions either as tax either. So both the players and the club win out of this, and they save tax money. HMRC's got wind of this. They've gone after the clubs, and there's some rules now on capping how much image rights can be paid. But because of those caps, we can now work it out in the background. So image rights of about 15 million quid were paid to the players in the first year, about 20 million quid in the second year, and it stabilized a bit of about 23 million quid in the year that we did really well and came seventh. So as you can see, as the club established itself in the Premier League, so the rules really focus around how much you're paying the players as theirs, which increases the cap. They can have 20% as image rights of their whole pay package, but the club can't pay more than 15% of their commercial revenue. So if you're growing your commercial revenue, it means you can siphon up more of the players into their companies and save a bit of tax. But as you can see, I think we have pretty much hit the top of our commercial revenue until we get back into Europe. Being in Europe and not being in Europe is probably the booster to commercial revenue. Outside of that, we're not growing our commercial revenue as a club anymore that much. So you see image rights tail off. Amortization, we've already talked about, 40 to about 60 to about 70 in amortization. Manager costs I haven't put in here because, again, it's all broken down. I don't know. I would imagine manager costs are about 2 million quid. And by the way, for squad cost ratio, you only put the manager in. So you put the players and you put the manager / head coach in, and you have amortization. And that's kind of what most of the calculation is about. There are a few other trimmings and other bits and pieces, but that's pretty much the bulk of all the costs that are in there. So the manager costs for this year, again, we're not in, this is the good news. We did all of our crazy for managers this season. Squad cost ratio was a dummy run this season. It wasn't real. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, which is good. But I think it's probably about 2 million quid. I haven't put it in. It fairly doesn't make a difference to when you put these numbers in. Oh, with Rich, we played some numbers around. You might switch your squad cost ratio by maximum 1% by how much you pay the manager through all this stuff. Then you've got the revenues. They come straight out the accounts. We know what those are, which is really pleasing. If you see of this, 155 first year back, 190, remember, second year back, up to 220 in the year that we did really well. And again, we'll talk about what the revenues are now we're in Europe. But again, we took the tanks of the league position for this season. Then we get on to player sales. So if you think about the mechanic, right, of PSR, and how did you get yourself out of a jam for PSR? You sold players. It's going to be exactly the same for squad cost ratio. You're going to have your squad cost ratio. How do you get out of a jam? You sell players again. So this is going to be the same thing. Now, just like PSR, and remember, you could have a certain loss, 35 million quid every single year, but you smoothed it out over 3 years. Basically, you added and aggregated 3 years together, and you got your total loss. But the whole idea was it had to average to less than 35 million quid a year. But they kind of totaled it up. They're kind of using the same concept now for your player sales, in the fact that for your year of squad cost ratio, you take your year of selling players and the profit on that. You take last year and you take the year before. So it's the current year and 2 years back. And you take the profit or loss, all the players you sold, and you tot up for all 3 years, the profit or loss that you made on every single player, aggregate it all together and divide by 3. So you take the average year that you've got of the last 3 years. So you might now kind of get a spidey sense of why I'm saying it's critical strategically when we sell Anderson. And I'll give you a little kind of illustrative view of what's on the slide of why as well. So just to demystify it for those that are listening, not watching, if we kind of think about our back of a fag packet calculation for squad cost ratio, the first season we were up, it was 106%. Second year up was 95%. Last season, we were compliant, theoretically, if it was live, at 84%. It probably was actually 85% by the time we put the manager cost, but we were pretty much on the line, I would say, in that successful season with Nuno when we came 7th. We were about on the line for squad cost ratio, right? So when we get to this last year, we can spitball what our squad cost ratio is, and I'll come on to the theories of it below. But remember, it doesn't matter. It's a dummy run this year. We just want to pass PSR, but it becomes live for 26-27. We don't do PSR, but this season coming is live for squad cost ratio, not PSR. So, roughly speaking, how are we doing then for, well, actually, if we look at the 3-year average for sales profits, I didn't tell you what they were, right? I actually just got to the punchline. But for the 3-year sales average of profits, in the first year, because again, you're taking your first year in the Prem, but you've got 2 years of selling players in the Championship, it was about 7 million quid. The second year jumped up to about 35, 36 million quid. And it was about 36, 37 million quid in the year that we came 7th. Now, on the right-hand side, this is what has been taken straight from the accounts, by the way. And for 25, 26, I've done it through my company system to figure out what the profits are actually on everyone that we have sold so far through the season. And that's what you see in bold below, right? But if you look at those numbers, remember, so for 22, 23, we need to take 2021, 21-22 and 22-23, add them all together, divide by 3. Now you see this massive jump we had in 23-24. That was because, can you remember the Niakate, Mangala, some crazy loans? Brennan Sale had crept into, just because we took the points deduction, but that crept into that year as well. And we posted this very well publicized £12 million profit, right? That was that year, okay, which was massive. We made profits on player sales of £100.5 million in that 23-24 season. Now, this is where we get into the strategy team about this. When you get a bumper year like that, remember, it's a 3-year arc. So if you have a good year this year, it helps you out this year. A third of that you get to take for this year. You get to put a third of it to next year and a third of it to the year afterwards. Okay. So that 100 million quid helped for 23-24. It helped for 24-25. Again, as you can see, the profits are around about 37, 35, 37. And you're getting 33 from that 100 every single year. And then for the year that we've just passed, we still get the benefit of that 100, right? So if you're going to have a marquee selling of a player that you're going to do, you want to space them out every 3 years, which is why I'm saying now that when you're doing this and being able to kind of pick when you're selling players, but if you've got a marquee player, you get to spread it over 3 years. This is helping clubs like us, right? Where we get to sell a gem once every few years. And it's not just impacting us for 1 year. We get the benefit for 3 years of it as well. And that's critical for clubs like us and Bournemouth and Newcastle and Villa and Brighton and everyone. So it's helping us. This is how I feel about it. I think it helps us more than the big six, to be honest, in the way that works. Now, if we have a quick look, so for this year, how are we going to do the squad cost ratio? Again, it doesn't matter, but if we think about the theories of it, right? So if you go to the table on the left, we drop out 3 years ago because that's no longer part of this year, and we get this year. So we've got the last year of the 100, we've got the 7 million from last year, but we've got this year's profits. Alanga, like one, I can't remember which listener it was that quite rightly said Alanga's crept into this year. It might have been you, Greg. Sorry, I don't know if it was, but we had about 44 million quid that we made on Alanga. Danilo, 11.3 million. Turner, woohoo, 3.6 million quid profit on that disaster. Sosa, 2.5 million quid. Miguel, we even made a profit. Thank you, Textar. I think it was, or whoever he went to, 2.3 million quid. Omabamidele, about 2.3 million quid. O'Brien, about 1 million quid. We should have made more, but we did a favour to Wrexham because they couldn't afford him. Josh Bowler, we made a loss of about 0.4 million on. Stamenic, we made a loss of just a little bit over 2 million quid when we went to Swansea, I think he went to. And then Emmanuel Dennis, we eventually got rid of him. And because we burnt off his contract and everything else as well, there was a loss of about 2.75 million quid on him. But all things told, that gives us, with still 3 weeks to go, but as I said, strategically, I don't think we're going to try and sell too many people at all before the 30th of June. We're sitting on about 44 million quid, right, that we've made. Now, that's really good. Bank that 44 million quid because that helps with the bottom line with revenues. But let's just think to this season, how far off of the 80, let's call it right on the nose of 85 for this year, the moving parts, right? Remember I was saying wages are up about 20, amortization was up about 20. That's where this comes in. 40 million quid, aggregate those two together. Costs have gone up for wages and amortization, about 40 million quid. Manager costs, God almighty, what have we been doing this year? Again, I think Ange cost us about 2.9. I don't know about Nuno. Dye, should we still pay it? I don't know what's going on there. But I think we probably incurred about 4 to 5 million quid extra money that we were paying from just stability of Nuno, right? Of which we had back in 24-25. As I've talked about image rights, the hidden bit that the club don't want to publicise, I don't think that they'll go up too much because commercial revenues, we might get a bit more commercial revenues just because of Europe, but you can't really turn on these image rights. They might be able to siphon a bit more, but they're taking it out of their pay packet. Their pay's kind of set. It's only for new players that are coming in. I don't think they'll move around that much. It's a bit of a fiddly thing to deal with. And I'm not going to delve into it too much, but I don't think they'll move around too much. So then we get into the revenue side of things. Again, we have talked about this. The good thing is, remember I was going, well, there's the cost of flying everyone around. Under squad cost ratio, don't need to worry about that. It's nothing to do with the cost. We just take the upside, the revenues. So we got money, about 20 million quid, 20.5 million quid from Europe. We got extra money from all of the shirt sales and all of the ticket sales and the extra match days at homes and all that jazz. And I think that will probably eclipse, as I said, slightly more than 27 million dip that we had in Premier League money. Loan fees are about the same as last year, pretty much, I would say, what we're getting in for loans. And again, this is where we get to the player sales. So remember, we dropped out that 2.6 from 3 years ago. So to get benefit and improve that 85%, or actually pay for above, we're having to pay for about 44 million quid that we've got that's more on the top that we need to balance out on the bottom. So revenues are going to add a little bit, we think, but not a lot. Loan fees aren't helping. So it's player sales. Again, we're going to have to do it. But we don't have to do it. We can be over this year. It doesn't matter because we're not being judged to squad cost ratio. But let's figure this out. If you've got 44 million quid, that's about 15 million pounds if you split it into 3 years. So we will probably be over squad cost ratio, I would say, for the year past. But do not panic, because we sell Anderson. And again, not even this summer, controversially, maybe not. Maybe he doesn't go this summer. But as long as we sell him before the 30th of June next summer, then we're okay probably for squad cost ratio, because that's going to be a profit of about 80, 90 million quid. Divide by 3, that's going to help offset some others. And you've seen all the players that we're also needing to sell probably this summer. Those profits will all go in there. So, Mystic Raf, will we be okay for squad cost ratio for the next season? Well, we don't really know, because also we don't know the players that we're bringing in for next season. So we don't know that. And by the way, hang tight, guys. Over this summer, we will do another episode with, you remember that massive transfer spreadsheet that we did and we pulled players in and out, and what was the impact on that? We'll do exactly the same for squad cost ratio. But is it in our power to meet squad cost ratio without doing anything too bonkers? Yes, is the answer. We are in the realm of being able to manage it. And if Anderson does go in the next 12 months, that is a massive jump towards actually handling our squad cost ratio, because we have got a big chunky lift on wages. And Murillo's just got a new contract, right, which is going to hit us next season for extra costs. Maybe not. And that'll be my one parting thing, by the way, is just a bit of logic play for those super geeky people that are out there. When you hear that Murillo's got a new contract, right? Nico's going to get a new contract. Sangari's got 2 years. He's going to get a new contract, right? Hopefully, cross fingers. But when they get a new contract, don't panic. You don't suddenly go, oh, no, that's more cost on the bottom line. Not necessarily. Let's take Sangari very quickly. He's got 2 years left. We probably want to put 4 years left to keep him for another 4 years. So if he gets a huge hike in pay and you don't really extend the contract very much, the wage goes up for the next year, and the amortization, you don't really get any help. You're just pretty much paying the same amortization that goes down. But if you go from 2 years to 4 years, the amortization payments kind of half of what they are. Well, they don't really half, but you get to spread them again of what's residual, and you spread it out over the 4 years. Your amortization payments go down. And if you're not going to give him a bumper pay rise, you give him an extra 10, 15 a week, maybe £1,000, but you're splitting it over your amortization over an extra 2 years. It actually can benefit, weirdly, your finances for every single year. So, little trick when you're doing it, when you hear the news that we're giving out all these contracts, look for what's the increment of what they're being paid, but how many years are we putting on their contracts, extending by how many years? That's the key, if it's good for the finances or bad for the finances. Little trick, but sorry guys, that's an awful lot. And we'll go to some questions. And I know the squad cost ratio is a bit of a new thing, so if we've got some questions on that, let's do that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is an extended episode, clearly, because there's a lot to get through. So we'll just hold on for a few more minutes. Richard, anything you want to jump in on?
No, just real quick for American viewers, because when Raf and I were getting into the mechanics of the squad cost ratio, you know, obviously people in the US, they cover or look at or support other sports rather. So when you're looking at this, the purpose behind this is very similar to the luxury tax concept in for certain sports in the US. But the difference is with Major League Baseball, for example, doesn't really apply. Because you could have billionaire owners who are just helping you overcome that increase in wages, and they can just kind of supplement, you know, unlike what we were talking about with Marinakis to a degree, they can just keep supplementing that increased tax amount that they're going over, because they can just pump a lot of money, like Los Angeles Dodgers, New York Mets, New York Yankees, etc. But versus this version of it that we're looking at and what Raf is talking about is more akin to what you would see in NBA, where it does allow for other teams that are not the big market teams to have opportunities because they don't have billionaire owners each time to be able to be competitive, right, in terms of what they can do. views. So just for those American viewers out there, I won't get into the weeds on it. I have a little summary that I can send somebody if you're really interested and you really want to get into the details, but I just thought it would be a good thing to call out because there are a number of people, I mean, we know, who are in the US who love watching the podcast and also follow sports in the US. So just a little call out there.
No, cool. I think that my takeaway is that obviously we've all kind of got into a little bit of a flap when it comes to finances because we did suffer the 4 points deduction, which we look back on it now, maybe it was a tactical thing, or I think we felt hard done by, but ultimately it all paid off when we stayed in the Premier League. And teams coming up from the Championship always come up with that situation that they could only lose less when they were down in the Championship. They can lose more coming up, but it kind of takes time to catch up. So will the squad cost ratio potentially help RAF those teams that are coming up from the Championship? I'm thinking of Coventry just coming up. It's going to help them.
Absolutely massively. Because if you think for PSR, you only got 1 year's worth of you only got 1 year's worth of Premier allowance, and you got the measly 13 million a year for your Championship allowance.
That's why we got stung.
All of that handbrake has been taken off completely, right? Because it is your revenues for this year. So if you think about the whole squad, the wages for that the whole squad was a whole lot of misfits that they got that weren't wanted anywhere, and they put them all together and actually got promoted. It's an amazing story, but they're probably not paying them. I don't know, like that much. The wage bills are not large. Look at ours, was like 40 million quid when we came up, but we're getting suddenly 150 million quid coming in as revenues, or 130 if you're kind of down the bottom, middle of the range kind of thing, down the bottom. So suddenly you're actually in a really good kind of squad cost ratio. You're not suddenly on the back foot coming up. What you do have is lots of room, but you've got to do it in the right way to increase your wage bill with now the trappings that you've got. The issue you have is that the Championship have also adopted squad cost ratio. So if you load up coming up, that's the risk. You suddenly balloon your wage bill up, and then you go back down and you don't have the Premier League money anymore. I mean, the parachute payments and everything else as well. You could shoot yourself in the foot if you don't stay up. But for you to give it a good college try massively when you come up, there is a massive scope for you to, do what Sunderland did, basically. Go out and spend, but spend well. Like, you definitely, I think it helps clubs stay up.
Fantastic. Well, listen, that's good for them. And I think closing the goalpost, if you like, is a good thing for football, because it really was a difficult thing to take, I think, when you come up into the Premier League and you're trying to compete, and then you're almost getting penalised because you can't lose as much money as your fellow Premier League clubs. I think it was made us a bit hamstrung. Stuart in the comments was asking, I think you might have just missed the RAF says, yeah, it is better for clubs like Bournemouth and us and Brentford, and maybe benefits us. I mean, the other big six clubs are going to see some benefit as well, but I kind of maybe think RAF was saying that the situation for the likes of us and your Brightons, etc., means that actually we're going to perhaps benefit in a better way than what the PSR system allowed us.
It swings and roundabouts, and we'll do an in-depth analysis of the kind of winners and losers probably at some point. If you think about it, the Man U's and the Man U, the Liverpool, and the Man City, they have Arsenal, they have insane revenue cycles, right? Insane revenue cycles. Now, under PSR, they had a huge cost base as well that was kind of balancing out for their PSR and profit. That whole cost base, except for the wages and amortization, but running a huge club like Liverpool that's global, that has massive costs, they're all taken out. They don't have to deal with them anymore, right? So they also get benefit as well. But if you think about it, yes, they win, but the smaller clubs win as well. And the incremental win, I think, for a club coming up that isn't saddled with 2 years of crap and just having a full swing with Premier League money that's coming in, not being penalised, I think it's a bigger win for the small clubs than the big clubs. But I do think that everyone kind of benefits out of this to a degree in some way.
Okay, so I'm going to, I think, say to everyone listening and watching, thank you so much for sticking with us. We're going into about nearly an hour and a half. When it comes to me releasing this on the pod, I think I'm going to chop it into 2 episodes. We can do that, I think, quite nicely. We'll do the first 2, and then we'll release a part 2 as well. So that's going to be, I think, the best thing to do. But just to round off then, the headline I'm taking away from this is that we don't need to sell Elliot Anderson. If we do sell him, we should make sure that it's after the 1st of July, because that's going to help us with squad cost ratio compliance and be a benefit to us for the future. And even if we don't sell Elliot Anderson in this summer, that's still going to be okay, providing we do probably make that sale by the 30th of June 2027. So squad cost ratio is here. PSR is on its way out. Headlines, again, are that we seem like we're on the line. Maybe a little cheeky sale will kind of just make sure we get over that. But all looks pretty good. Raf, absolute legend. Pat and Anna showing their appreciation, as I'm sure everyone else.
Guys, I'm so appreciated. Everyone stayed on for an hour and a half. It's absolutely crazy. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Said,
it's totally enthralling, and you do explain it clearly. Actually, Raf, you do a fantastic job of explaining it, and it's actually an hour and a half that goes quite quickly. And we're all Forest fans, and so finding out a little bit more about this kind of stuff is actually not something that's on tap. So we're very, very lucky. So thank you very much to you. Just quickly, Raf, Elliot Anderson, do you think he might stay for another year with us, or do you think it's a dead cert he's going to City?
I actually put it at 50-50. I don't think anyone else other than it's going to be Man City or no one. And I think that if they don't stump up, and they don't like paying massive transfer fees, they do it once in a while. They don't. And as you can see, Marinakis is holding all the cards here. He's holding all the cards. And we've seen what he did with Gibbs White. So I genuinely think that he will push them to the limit, and he'll just go, do you know what? You've annoyed me enough. Go away. We'll talk about it next summer, or potentially do something like that. And it's not like Anderson's jostling for a move. He's a really good lad. He's a professional. He's got mates that are here, right? And you never know, Newcastle might get themselves in a better position that maybe he could go to Newcastle next summer instead. I don't know what's going on. So I put it about maybe I'm half glass full at 50-50. But there is definitely a sizable chunk of a percentage that he stays.
Well, he's off to the World Cup, which starts next week. He is going to be a starting midfielder. And my guess is he's going to have an absolute stormer, and that might well bring other parties to the table. We will see. We will be back very, very soon. Next week, we're going to be doing a couple of one-withs. Andrew Hayward is going to be coming on for a one-with. That's going to be sort of Tuesday-ish, I think. So keep your eyes out for that. But Richard Spray, anything you want to add before we go, buddy?
Nope. Just quickly want to shout out Steph. She sent us $5, so thank you for that. We really appreciate it. And she again is giving Raf plaudits as she should, because he is brilliant. Yeah. And as she said, she always looks forward to these. So just wanted to call her out real quick.
No, thank you. I did see it, then missed it. So yes, Steph, you're a legend. Okay, guys, we'll be back very soon. Don't forget like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff as well. We'll see you soon.
Very quickly.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.